Hey everybody, this is Rhett. Welcome to Statistics. In this video, we'll look at the first step in the process of hypothesis testing, stating the hypotheses. Let's take a minute and discuss the basic idea of hypothesis test. We need to make a decision about the value of a parameter, such as mu, the population mean. Unfortunately, the true value of the parameter is unknown. Therefore, there may be different hypotheses about the true value of this parameter. In a hypothesis test, there are two opposing hypotheses, one of which is called the null hypothesis and is denoted H0. That's an H with a subscript of 0. The null hypothesis represents the status quo. It's the assumed truth. We give the null hypothesis the benefit of the doubt. It could be that this is previously published information, a generally accepted value of the parameter, or a generally applied value of the parameter. The opposing hypothesis is called the alternative hypothesis, and this can be denoted H alpha, HA, or H1. The alternative hypothesis is a research hypothesis. It could be an update, a challenge, a narrow application. Oftentimes, the phrase test whether introduces the alternative hypothesis. Consider this. We have one parameter, mu, a population mean, and three different opinions. According to so-and-so, the average time spent weekly studying for a 3-hour college class is 6 hours. Tom, Dick, and Harry each have an opinion regarding the average study time. Tom thinks that the average has decreased over time. Tom thinks there needs to be an update. Dick thinks the average is more for an introductory stats class. Harry thinks the average is different at his college. Let's construct the appropriate opposing hypotheses for each opinion. Tom thinks the average time spent weekly studying for a 3-hour college class has decreased over time. Decreased translates to a less than statement. Tom's hypothesis is that the mean is less than 6. Tom's hypothesis is an alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis is the complement of Tom's. H0 is mu is greater than or equal to 6. Greater than or equal is the complement of less than. Next, let's consider Dick's hypothesis. Dick thinks the average time spent weekly studying for an introductory stats class is more than the average of 6 hours for all 3-hour college classes. Is more than translates to a greater than statement. Dick's hypothesis is that the mean is greater than 6. His hypothesis is an alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis is the complement. H0 is mu is less than or equal to 6, since less than or equal is the complement of greater than. Finally, let's look at Harry's hypothesis. Harry thinks the average time spent weekly studying for a 3-hour college class is different at his college. Is different translates to a not equal statement. Harry's hypothesis is that the mean does not equal 6. This is an alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis is the complement. H0 is that mu equals 6. So we have 3 different opinions, 3 pairs of opposing hypotheses, and we end up with 3 types of test. Tom's hypothesis is that the mean is less than 6. So we end up with these 2 opposing hypotheses. The alternative is Tom's hypothesis that the mean is less than 6. The null is the complement, that the mean is greater than or equal to 6. Dick's opinion is that the mean is more than 6. In this case, the alternative is that the mean is greater than 6. The null hypothesis is the complement, that the mean is less than or equal to 6. Harry's hypothesis is that the mean is other than 6. In other words, the mean does not equal 6. The complement is mu equals 6. When stating pairs of opposing hypotheses, it's sometimes easier to start with the alternative hypothesis. Then the null hypothesis will just be the complement. Here are some common phrases that will help you get started with the alternative hypothesis. If the alternative hypothesis should be a less than statement, sometimes you'll see the phrase is less than, has decreased, is smaller, has declined. In this case, the alternative is that the mean is less than some value. And here are some phrases that might indicate a greater than statement is appropriate. Is more than, has increased, is larger, has grown, in which case the alternative might be mu is greater than some value. And finally, here are some phrases that might indicate that a not equal statement is appropriate in the alternative hypothesis. Differs from, is other than, is inconsistent, is no longer, or has changed. After you have the alternative hypothesis, it's easy to construct the null hypothesis. These will always be complements. The complement of less than is greater than or equal to. The complement of greater than is less than or equal to. And the complement of does not equal is equal. Notice that equality is always in the null hypothesis. In the alternative hypothesis, we have strict inequalities, either strictly less than, strictly greater than, or does not equal. Once we have the opposing hypotheses clearly stated, we should take a moment to note the direction of the test. The direction of the test, whether left, right, or to, is determined by the alternative hypothesis. If the alternative hypothesis is a less than statement, we end up with a left-tailed test. If the alternative hypothesis is a greater than statement, we end up with a right-tailed test. And finally, if the alternative hypothesis is a not equal statement, we end up with a two-tailed test. Let's get some practice. According to Facebook.com, the mean number of community pages, groups, and events that users are connected to is 80. Test whether the mean number of Facebook connections to community pages, groups, and events is greater than 80. I see the phrase test whether. This usually introduces the alternative hypothesis. I also see the phrase is greater than, which makes me think there will be a greater than statement in the alternative hypothesis. So we begin with the alternative hypothesis, mu is greater than 80. The complement of greater than would be less than or equal to. So the null hypothesis is that the mean is less than or equal to 80. This is a right-tailed test since there is a greater than statement in the alternative hypothesis. Let's try another one. The Pew Internet and American Life Project reports that American adults send a mean of 10 text messages per day. Test whether the mean number of text messages per day differs from 10. Again, we see the phrase test whether, which usually indicates the alternative hypothesis. I see the phrase differs from, which usually indicates a not equal statement in the alternative hypothesis. So let's construct our alternative hypothesis. That would be that the mean does not equal 10. It differs from 10. The complement of does not equal is equals, so the null hypothesis is that the mean is equal to 10. Finally, according to the bottler, a 12-ounce can of cola will have at least 12 ounces on average. Test whether the bottler is shorting customers. If the bottler is shorting customers, the mean will be less than 12. But we give the benefit of the doubt to the bottler, and therefore the null hypothesis is that the mean is at least 12. This is a left-tailed test since there is a less than statement in the alternative hypothesis. So, in this video, we learned how to construct the two opposing hypotheses, the null hypothesis, H0, and the alternative hypothesis, H alpha. We look for clues in the phrasing that may indicate that a less than, greater than, or not equal statement is appropriate. The null hypothesis is the complement of the alternative hypothesis, and equality is always in the null hypothesis. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Until next time, stay real and be rational.